Time for our news review now, where we take you through the morning papers. This morning with author and journalist at the newspaper, Benjamin Butterworth, and Mail Online reporter, Lettice Borowski. Very good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Sometime yesterday, we might have expected that it was going to be local elections all over the front pages, and clearly they do feature. But Prince Harry then did his interview with the BBC, and that has clearly taken up an awful lot of space on the front pages instead. Lettice, kick us off. Front page of the Mirror, a headline that is repeated on several of the front pages. One of the lines from this interview, "Dad won't talk to me."
Yeah, and in a way, it is that sort of the first time I watched the interview that he does with the BBC, it's that first heartbreaking moment where you see them as a father and son relationship where they aren't talking to each other. And on a human level, he sort of looks like he's going to cry and be like, I want reconciliation. But this isn't just a father and son conversation. This is a king and a prince involved in this. And I personally think that Harry's gone about this all the wrong way. Not sort of only in the interview does he sort of go into detail about things like, I don't know how long my father has to live. Detail that perhaps, although the king has been very open about his health concerns and what's going on with his health, there are things that are being withheld from us. We know he's still in ongoing chemotherapy, but we don't actually know whether it's going well, whether it's not going well. And so him saying things like that makes, perhaps for the rest of the public, think that maybe this isn't going well. Maybe he actually is much more unwell than he's letting on. And that obviously comes just 2 days after the king released another deeply personal message saying that, he is now one of the statistics in this sense.
And to say that royal correspondents kind of say it goes counter to any message coming out of the palace that treatment is going well and they're feeling positive.
Exactly.
It's the sort of message that
and it's something that, as if someone is going through something like cancer, that should be theirs to control the narrative on. And I think that he shouldn't be wading in on those sort of conversations.
What did you make of it? Let's just show another paper while we talk about it. The Express has the same headline, "Harry, my dad won't speak to me." What did you make of this? Because it came off the back of him losing at the Court of Appeal. Yeah. He's been pitching for a higher level of security when he comes to this country, which he says would protect not only him but his wife and his children as well. And he feels without it that he doesn't feel safe bringing them here. So it was off the back of that. And he talked a lot about that as well, didn't he?
Yeah, and he says that basically the king could fix this if he wants to. Not that the king could hand him the security, but he could remove the blocks apparently that are in the way. And he also says that he describes it as a classic establishment stitch-up between the last government to this government. Now, the one thing to reference is, you remember Taylor Swift? She got this extra level of security at one of her Wembley shows after there'd been terrorist threats at the previous one in Austria. So there is an example of someone outside the top of the royal family, the top of government, getting this recently, which slightly complicated the question, I think, in government. But it sounds like there's no intention of them to change it. And it also, he talks about the fact that he hasn't spoken to his dad, that this is what's getting in the way of it. And you certainly sympathise on a family level, but you also have to think, he wrote a book with quite remarkable detail about those family relationships, about very intimate moments. And so what do you expect if you treat your nearest and dearest, for whom the privacy is hypersensitive, like that? And I think he's to some extent, he's reaping what he sows. And he's doing it in public again. You kind of wonder, if he wanted to fix this, would a public interview be the way to do it, when that's what's clearly irked the royal family so much?
Also, when previous public interviews, like his Oprah Winfrey interview that he did with Meghan, I can't remember what year it was in, but around a few years ago, when that was also so catastrophically for their relationship. I feel like when you watch this video of him speaking, he clearly sees himself as the victim in this situation and almost doesn't see that he's done anything wrong. You mentioned there the book. He just says, they might not forgive me for a book that I wrote. Well, it wasn't just a book. In it, you detailed, how you did drugs, how you fought physically with William, how you called your stepmother a wicked stepmother. Camilla was a wicked person in your life.
And doesn't it describe moments at the funeral of Prince Philip and the conversation he had with his dad? I mean, it's all just personal stuff that I don't think anybody would want out there. But on the other side, I do think there's a very strong argument for him to have this security, because he might not be a working royal, but the level of fame, which largely determines the level of threat, the significance of attacking Prince Harry from some malactor, is a consequence of birth. He didn't ask to be a prince, and he didn't ask to be known by practically every person on the planet. He can't avoid that fact. But one of the real questions in that case is that he offered to pay for it, of course, but can you give a private firm the kind of intelligence information that would normally go to specialist officers? And I think that's a real sticking point.
I think that's quite interesting, but I will say that, one, he's a multi-millionaire, not only from the past few years when he's done his Netflix deals and his Spotify deals, so it's not like he doesn't have the funds to be able to fund this. Also, I'm not sure the security threat, what's the difference between the security threat to him in America as it is in the UK? Why is he not fighting to have some sort of personal security detail in America as well?
Well,
and very quick, I'm just going to bring in another paper while you carry on. But the Sun, Harry's lost it, is their front page. And, you know, is it a surprise that we see some of the tabloids, at least, taking a more kind of hostile view to what he said, given his battles with the press?
I think he thought he would get the public sympathy on this, and I think he's been mistaken again. He was clearly advised by his PR team or his PR firm that this was going to be a good idea, and I think that that's where there's been this error, this disconnect, because I don't think this is going to be... I don't think it's going to go down with the public well.
What do you think? Do you think that the papers are being, or that headline at least, well, Harry's lost it, is unfair?
I mean, look, the tabloids obviously have a vested interest because he's been taking legal action that's been extremely expensive, and I think the Sun had to apologise recently before something went to court. So obviously there's a long-running fight between the two of them. So he was never going to get a fair hearing, I dare say. Look, I actually agree that he should have the security, but he seems to go about it in a sort of self-pitying way, as though everybody should feel sorry for him, and I don't think that's a very effective way to win the trust. Simply stating the fact that, you know, look at the awful tragedy that happened to his mother. Of course you'd want to take every precaution with your security. I think that would strike a better tone.
Let's move on to the other main story dominating the papers, and that is the results of yesterday's local elections. The Guardian front page, Reform wins beginning of the end of the Tories, says Farage. He's saying it's the end of the two-party system, and he's talking about reform quake.
And I think he might have a point. I mean, these reform swings were greater than predicted. There was talk if they might get 400 councillors. Well, they got the best part of 700, I think. So way better than expectations. Now, if you look at the result for the Labour Party, 2021 was the absolute lowest year. Keir Starmer nearly resigned after those results. They lost the Hartlepool by-election. And so to lose 2/3 of the council seats compared with that low point when he nearly quit being Labour leader is really bad. There's no glossing over that. But then you look at the Tories and their drop was enormous. And of it is that Labour, if it fixes these problems, if it delivers things, if things get better in the country in a few years, it's got a reason to exist. If the Tories don't find a constituency of people that still want to vote for them, then Reform has truly, you know, stolen their clothing as the right-wing party.
What do you think? Let's look at the Daily Mail while we talk about this.
Yes.
Lettuce, we haven't got a huge amount of time. The Reform Revolution is their headline there on their front page. I mean, do you feel that this is an existential threat to the Tories? I
don't think we should look into it too much. You know, this is just one, it's the local elections, largely in local elections, smaller parties do win a much higher percentage of the vote. I mean, look at the Lib Dems, they always perform quite well in local elections like that, but that's never translated to them becoming part of the two-party state that we live in. I do think that it's a long time to a general election, and what we've got to see now is Reform have actually got to turn their success in winning votes into successful governance, and that's going to be the question.
OK, that's the big test for them now. Plenty of time to revisit this in the next couple of hours, because you'll be with us all morning. But for the moment, thanks very much indeed.
We arrive